Welcome back to some breaking news. We want to fire that is burning just west of Loveland. And as we are watching right now from Sky 9, we are seeing stunning pictures. This shows you the size and scope of what firefighters up in Larimer County are dealing with. The latest estimate on the size of this fire came in from the U.S. Forest Service, and they had flown over it themselves. And they had taken an earlier projection of nearly 800 acres down to 247. But we're also seeing a lot of activity and a lot of movement, and that's what has people concerned. And that is why there are evacuations. This fire is burning near Storm Mountain, and it's just west of Loveland. This is the area we're talking about here. And obviously, many people in northern Colorado are seeing that footprint, that signature of what is called the Alexander Mountain Fire. It started burning before noon, and they are continuing to try to battle it. But as you can see, as hot and dry as things have been, it is a very difficult fire just to get a scope on right now to understand the size of it and then figure out the best way to attack it. Highway 34 near there has been shut down. This is from 25 looking up in that direction. Our friend Steve Steger is out there now, and he's been getting a look at what is taking place on the ground as firefighters and first responders start to manage people and assets. And Steve, what can you tell us from where you are?
Tom, let me set the scene for you. We are on Highway 34 at County Road 29. This is where the road closure starts. There's a CSP trooper here and some CDOT employees who are kind of directing traffic here. We've seen traffic move down Highway 34, a lot of horse trailers, a lot of things that you could tell people are kind of getting their stuff and getting out as quickly as possible. And we've, from our vantage point here at the corner, watched that smoke burn from what looked like white smoke for a long period of time to a plume of darker smoke as you see some of the planes making airdrops over that fire right now. I want to bring in Jerry Barger. He has been here with his camera in hand trying to get a look at the shot. You want to get the retardant drop. But what have you seen since you've been here? You've been here about 20 minutes before we got here.
Well, it started out, it was blowing east, and then it kind of blew to the south. It's gotten wider since I've been here, and that black cloud is disturbing.
Yeah, it really is, because
you think there's a house on fire or something.
It was shrouded back kind of behind the white for a long time, and you saw this plume of black smoke in the air. You were talking about the law enforcement agencies that you've seen rolling in here. Who have you seen?
Boulder, Larimer, Wyoming, Loveland, Fort Collins, just everybody.
Just about everybody, all moving pretty quickly, too.
Yeah, oh yeah, heading up the canyon.
How long have you lived up here?
I've lived in the area for about 20 years.
Seen anything like this ever?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the other fires that came down. Cameron Peak you could see pretty close from here. And then the one that was in Estes, that was pretty big. Yeah. But I haven't seen it where I live. I live out west of Berthoud, so I haven't seen anything there yet, but it's tinderbox.
Hey, we were talking about these conditions. Even on the ground here, it's absolutely dry. You haven't gotten much rain up here in a while.
Not in a long time. And where we live in Berthoud, we're kind of in the rain shadow of Longs and Meeker. So we typically don't get the rain. It goes north and south and comes together east of us.
Yeah. Well, you've got the long lens. Keep us posted if you see another
I see a drop, plane. I'll send it to you.
Well, plane's moving in. Jerry, thank you so much. So that's the scene here from the roadblock. And again, we've been watching as many different aircraft are attacking this fire right now. I saw the plane kind of come through and make that red retardant drop on top of the fire, but then we've seen helicopters making laps back and forth. I think there's a reservoir over this way where they're filling up and trying to get something on that fire. Jerry was telling me earlier it's pretty kind of rugged terrain up where this fire is, so you imagine it's tough to get personnel up there to fight a fire like this, Tom. We'll keep an eye on it here from the corner of Highway 34 and County Road 29. To try to get out from some of those mandatory evacuations.
All right, Steve, of course, we'll be checking back with you on what's a very serious situation up there west of Loveland. Highway 34 closed in that area because of the fire. But let's get over to Corey Reppenhagen for a look at part of the equation that's gone into this fire. And Corey, Jerry was just saying, Jerry Barger from Berthoud was saying they just haven't had any rain up there in a long time. There's a lot of fuel.
Yeah, and that's a big problem with this. The climate has not been friendly. Not a lot of moisture has fallen in that area. Temperatures have been very hot, hotter than usual, and we've had a lot of direct sunlight. Over the last 3 months, this has been kind of an accumulating. The good news is kind of in the weather of the day. You saw that shot there that Steve Steger was providing, also the helicopter shots, and you could see those smoke plumes going straight up in the air. For the most part, they were slightly tilted. But that is an indication that the atmosphere, as far as the winds are concerned, are being somewhat friendly to those firefighters. When the winds really start to gust, like we saw in 2020, those smoke plumes are tilted sideways, and that's when we know there's big trouble underneath there. But here's a satellite or the radar picture right here. We put a filter on it so that you can see the finest particles. And this right here is the smoke plume that's coming from this fire. The origin point is right here, and at times we see this radar picture turn yellow in this area. This is just to the west of Loveland, just to the south of Masonville. So this would be at the southeast perimeter of where the 2020 Cameron Peak burn scar is located, just maybe outside of that zone. But we saw those winds kicking up. We don't have a measurement. We don't have really weather stations right in that fire, but in the area of Loveland and up into the foothills, they're picking up, those weather stations are picking up wind gusts in the 20 to 25 mile per hour range. So that's pretty significant, but nothing like the 70 to 80 mile per hour winds that we saw during the 2020 fire, which would certainly be bad. Now, where is the winds headed? Now, here's the forecast model going forward here, and we'll see the winds generally kick up into the 20 to 30 mile per hour range over the next 15, 16 hours as we go through the day here. And we heard the eyewitness say that the smoke plume was blowing to the east and then started moving to the south. And one of the reasons for that is the winds are predominantly out of the west here, blowing straight to the east. But in the afternoon, this is later on tomorrow, but in the afternoon, this air starts to ride upslope, and you get a convergence right here along the foothills. And that's why the smoke plume started going to the east and then down to the south. But in general, that smoke is kind of floating over the Front Range area. Here's the forecast model for smoke as far as this morning was concerned before that fire started. But we already have smoke in the air from the west here. This high pressure system just to our southeast here, spinning clockwise here, that's pulling all of this smoke over the state of Colorado. We have some of that smoke over the next 24 to 36 hours will be right here in the Denver metro area. And now we'll add the smoke on top of that. So to wrap up, I'd say the winds are being somewhat friendly in the 20 mile per hour range for these firefighters. The humidity, however, is in the teens in that area, and of course the temperature, those direct sunlight, is not being great. But really, the problem with this fire is certainly the climate over the last 3 months, really. No rain and just a lot of high heat.
Corey, thanks. Those live pictures from Sky 9 giving you quite a look at that giant smoke plume. And again, a live picture now looking at it to the west of Loveland, and you can see that plume. It is a thick, dark plume of smoke that is rising still. But again, as Corey was alluding to, mostly rising and not necessarily drifting too fast as though the winds were feeding and fueling that fire. But this live picture from Sky 9 certainly tells a scary tale of what is playing out now west of Loveland. Again, this fire has been burning for over 2 hours now. Some viewers have been sending in some pictures, their views. We were just talking, Steve was, with Jerry Barger from Berthoud, but other people who have sent in some photographs as well give us a pretty good idea of what they've been seeing throughout the day. This picture here from Mark Bergman, obviously with flame there, and then you can see the smoke coming over the ridge. News pictures sent in by Trenton, and then more pictures where you can see the flame. There's video of the flames burning and the smoke continuing to fill the air. And as we've seen with the size of this plume that is rising from this fire, the Alexander Mountain Fire, this is visible from a long way away. People are seeing this throughout the Front Range, up and down, because this has climbed into what was a beautiful blue sky day for most people before this smoke started to fill in. Sky 9 continues to work over the area and is now providing pictures where we can see some of the fire activity in the darkest of the smoke that is in there. But it is of great concern not only where the smoke and fire is, but where it's headed as well. And Corey had a look at that as far as the forecast. We also do know about mandatory evacuations as well that have been made. So, and you could certainly see why. This is something they don't have any control of right now and are hoping to get control of it soon. So this is these are some of the places where you can evacuate to. The Namaquah Elementary School is one. The Estes Park Events Complex is another. And animals, of course, welcome as well at the Arena Circle there. So this is a very, very active situation. Steve Steger again now at that road closure there at Highway 34 with more. Steve?
Watching for them to come down.
I want to get in touch with Carolyn Wamsley here, who you were on the phone feverishly trying to get to your dad who's in this area. What was he telling you?
He said he didn't have time to talk.
And how long ago was that?
2 hours ago.
And you said, Dad, you need to get out.
He's under mandatory evacuation and he was still at the house.
You keep bugging him.
Yep, so I had to have the sheriff call him.
I was going to say, you walked over to the Colorado State Patrol trooper here and said, here, you take the phone.
All right, I needed a higher authority apparently.
How old is your dad?
84.
Is he a little stubborn, or is he's just trying to get everything?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you first got over here and you saw that plume of smoke, what were you thinking?
It's pretty big. It looked like it was almost shifting west, but the flags were flying east, so it's just really hard to tell what direction it's going to go.
All right, so I think the State Patrol trooper said 15 minutes is his maximum?
Dad should be down in 15 minutes.
If he's watching 9 News, do you want to tell him?
15 minutes, you're on the clock, Dad.
You're on the clock, Dad. Oh, somebody was yelling, don't move. Making sure everything's all right. You know, what's interesting, Tom, as we've been watching it, I'll keep Caroline over here. As we've been watching it, we've seen some, like, Larimer Sheriff's Office deputies and some Boulder deputies make their way through at a pretty quick clip. And often in situations like this, that's the evacuation order that you get, is you'll have the sheriff come and knock on your door. What was his evacuation notice, by the way?
The wind is blowing west, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just never know where fire's going to go.
It's been shifting
Yeah.
quite a bit since we've been here.
Yeah.
What kind of notice did your dad get at the door? Was it just a knock from a sheriff's deputy?
Oh no, no co-alerts.
Okay.
He should have probably got a phone call and a text, but you don't get cell service up there all the time, so a phone call.
Well, okay, he's on the clock, so we'll see if he makes it out in 15 minutes. He's on the clock, and hopefully we can bring that to you on 9 News. But the good news is we do see a lot of people moving around and a lot of people getting out as some of those mandatory evacuations are kicking in. Tom, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Steve, best of luck to Carolyn and her dad. Again, these are the live pictures that are coming in from Sky 9, and you can see the size and scope of what they are dealing with there west of Loveland today. The Alexander Mountain Fire, considered to be some 247 acres in size. That would appear to be an estimate that is going to grow as they continue to get a better look at it. They were able to fly over it. The Forest Service came up with that estimate. You can still see the active flames there on the edges of the fire. And it's just a matter now of getting a good look at it, but also from the air fighting it. We've been able to see some of the planes trying to drop retardant and or water down on the fire. Of course, we'll continue to keep an eye on that. So again, this is the Loveland cam, and you can see just to the left what looks like a beautiful summer day, blue skies in Colorado, but to the right, the damage is being done right now by that Alexander Mountain Fire. So there's a good look at it from there. So we'll continue to keep an eye on things here. CDOT showing us this view. This is I-25 looking up towards US 34 in Loveland. Again, a similar story. Otherwise, just a beautiful late July day in Colorado, except for the fire that has now been started, burning maybe 2.5 hours now, maybe a little bit more. And we'll continue to follow this. Keep an eye on this situation, because if there's one thing we know is these animate in so many different ways, and they're very hard to predict. Corey was talking about the winds being gentle at this point, and Corey, that's probably the only real good news at this point, is as hot and dry as it's been, the fact that the winds are at least laying down that plume, mostly vertical.
Yeah, exactly. That is a very big thing to kind of point out, because remember those fires back in 2020, those smoke plumes tilted to the side almost at times. These plumes are kind of going upward, but it's interesting to hear the eyewitness reports that Steve Steger has managed to gather out there, talking about the wind shifting, not knowing where this fire is going to go. And one of the reasons I can kind of explain that for you here, using this wind forecast here kind of near the current time frame. Generally, all the winds are coming straight out of the west, but we have some interesting terrain and kind of almost like microclimate features here on the Front Range. And when the mountains start to heat up differently than the plains, as we get really hot down here, we start to get the winds to start drifting towards the slope. So that's this is a general thing that happens almost every afternoon in the summer. We get westerly winds, and then they start to counter. So you can see these wind barbs here coming out almost at the same strength as they are coming from the west, and they're kind of meeting right where that fire is here in Larimer County. Just these are the foothills here, so it's coming right about in here, just to the west of Loveland and to the south of Masonville. And so that's why they're getting these reports of shifting winds. And so it's hard to figure out what that means for firefighters. We know that these numbers, 18, 22, 15, these are not horrible for firefighters. That means that they'll be able to take almost a frontal, more aggressive approach to this. And that also means that they'll be able to use all the aviation assets that they need to in this type of wind scenario. Once they start getting up there pretty high, all you can do is get out of the way, and sometimes you can't even use some of those aviation assets. So these numbers here that I'm seeing are not awful. As we put the computer forecast model into motion here, it's going to generally stay that way. We could see a little bit of a pickup here, a little increase in some of the wind gusts later on tonight and to tomorrow morning. But again, 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts is not it's not great. Also, not given the point that it's shifting a little bit, that's not great. But the winds are at least being somewhat favorable. And then later on tomorrow afternoon, we get an even more favorable situation here. What's not favorable is the current temperature and humidity. So here's the current temperatures out here along the Front Range here. You can see Loveland at 89, Estes Park at 83. Keep in mind that this is all full sunshine, so direct sunlight hitting the earth. So that is one of the factors that contributes into the fire weather scenario. And I can tell you that in Loveland, the humidity right now is 12%. So that is against the firefighters. That means the fire will be able to spread quickly. The moisture will not be able to hold into any of the vegetation that's out there. So winds, not awful. Heat and humidity, not great. And the climate over the last 3 months, awful. So that's one of the things that's really leading up to this. Very below average precipitation in Larimer County, especially along the foothills there that normally get a little bit more precipitation this time of year. And we've just had those high temperatures with very few clouds. So the sunlight has been just draining, just evaporating all of the moisture off of the planet. And that is the scenario that they have working against us. So at least, Tom, for now, the winds are at least nothing like we've seen in some of those more dramatic historical fires that made those really long runs that the firefighters just had no chance of getting out in front of.
And we certainly know that the earlier you can have an impact in fighting a fire, you can really shorten the severity of it. And maybe get out in front of it a bit. If they can have those calm winds for a while, that'd be good. But you talk about weather impact, that's there today with those temperatures, that humidity. I want to let you know about the mandatory evacuation area in red up there in the upper left part. That's Storm Mountain. They've expanded it a little further to the south down to Pole Hill. The upper right of the red there is the Bobcat Ridge area. And then you see the yellow areas off into the east side. Those are voluntary evacuation areas. That's over by the Mariana Butte Golf Course. So it's a pretty big swath right now, and hopefully won't be growing too much more. But between road closures and mandatory and voluntary evacuations, there's a lot happening. If you have to evacuate, you don't necessarily have somewhere to go. You can go to Namaqua Elementary School. You can go to the Estes Park Events Complex and Animals at 5290. We want to take a look at Sky 9 because we are starting to see some aircraft there in the bottom center of your screen, starting to a helicopter passing through. And obviously one of the things they're trying to do is manage any spread of this fire. This smoke you can see is not rising straight. This does have a drift. So everything they can do in the early stages of this fire to try to contain or even to some extent steer it, maybe even back on itself. That's what they're trying to do right now. But again, Steve Stager has been reporting about airplanes and helicopters both already working this scene, trying to do what they can, along with crews that are just arriving on the ground, trying to get there and get on top of this fire. So we know the roads are going to be busy in that area. Again, you can see here from this camera, looking up towards Loveland from I-25 from CDOT. That's a pretty imposing sight there off on the horizon. Again, Steve Stager is up at that road closure at 34 and 29. He's back with us live with more. Steve?
Tom, yeah, we've been watching that plume kind of moving up from the fire as you were just talking about, and watching which way the smoke is kind of blowing. And there's no one direction that we've been able to watch during this fire. I'll step out of the way so you can take a better look at that. We're still, by the way, waiting on Carolyn's mom and dad. They've now been put on notice by Carolyn on TV that they better be out here in 15 minutes. I haven't checked the clock in a minute to make sure that they're coming down, but that's our vantage point of the fire right now. You can see that the two there's whiter smoke on one side and darker smoke on the other side. And every now and then we'll see a flare up of pretty dark smoke, which leads us to believe that something is burning, whether that's just thicker fuel up there or if it's something else. We're not quite sure right now just because we don't have a great view of this. But like Corey is talking about, the good news is we haven't felt the kind of wind that you feel on really awful fire days today. We do see the dry brush. Like if you can even kind of look down here in this gully where we posted up, you can see there's nothing here. I mean, there's a little bit of green, but not much. And the hay kind of gives you an idea just how dry the conditions are up here. And again, from what we've heard, this is a relatively rugged area where firefighters are trying to get up there right now and get a start on this fire. But there are lots of crews here. We have seen Larimer County Sheriff's deputies. We've seen Boulder County Sheriff's deputies since we've been here, all making their way through, making sure that the people who are in here are getting out. In fact, we've seen a few kind of convoys of people with a Larimer County Sheriff's deputy make their way this way, out of harm's way on US 34, headed eastbound back outside of the canyon here. You hear some sirens off in the distance, and we've also seen what's interesting. They are letting horse trailers in here. I think it's so folks can kind of pick up their animals, but here comes an unmarked police vehicle making its way back toward Highway 34. I think a lot of cases, Tom, like we were just talking about, you've got the different notification tools that you can use. There are those opt-in alerts, which is what Carolyn said that her dad got to telling him to get out. You've also have oftentimes the most effective way, firefighters will tell you, is just a knock on the door from a sheriff's deputy to tell them to get out. I'm going to step out of the way as more police cruisers make their way out here. There's the Larimer County Sheriff. We've seen them make a couple of spins here, going out and heading right back in, just trying to make sure everybody's out of harm's way. You cannot get westbound down US 34 right now. That is blocked off unless you have special permission from the Colorado State Patrol. And we'll keep an eye on that here. I have a feeling that road's not going to open anytime soon. So Tom, the scene here, a lot of people are nervous looking at that. It's an imposing image, but the good news is maybe 15, 20 minutes has tended to go straight side, which is very, very good news for firefighters. But that relative humidity number, not good news.
No, not good news at all. We'll take all the good news we can get. Steve, thanks very much. We're going to take one more look at Sky 9, but they are going to be heading out of the area now. That number down at the bottom right of your screen tells a big story too, 95 degrees. That's part of the equation for these fires and how quickly they can get started and get going. But it also makes it difficult for helicopters to operate. So Sky 9 is going to head back to the barn. But the pictures it's been delivering us today certainly are a big piece of what people are seeing in northern Colorado, the size and scope of a wildfire. And we certainly have been talking about the specter of wildfires as we've been talking about the lack of rain we've been haven't seen in several months now throughout much of the area. And we had Jerry Barger from Berthoud on with us a little bit earlier, and he mentioned that they just hadn't seen any rain up there. And everything begins to dry out. And when you have had rain, you know, over the past 12 months or so, we saw the drought monitor was in very good shape, but that also feeds the trees and the grasses to grow. And then when they dry out, they become very active fuel in situations like this. Some of the views we have seen from the helicopter indicate that the fire is moving. It seems to be spreading in different ways instead of just moving inexorably in one direction. Some of those burning tops of trees and stuff that get blown by the wind then start other fires a little bit further down the road there, like you can see how it's stretching out there to the right. But it is a signal. It's a signal of what's been happening in our state this year, especially around the Front Range. And we shall see how this fire plays out. We've seen too many of them. One is too many, and this is another one. Again, from Bow Mountain, the view that people all around the Front Range have of this fire. It's a much closer look when you're in Loveland, but from miles away, you can see this plume, and it certainly sends a chill up your back. Some of the people who saw this fire burning have been sharing photos with us, and they too tell the story of how this began and how suddenly it became a good-sized wildfire that has potential to grow even larger. Up there, it's the Alexander Mountain Fire. At this point, still being measured at 247 acres in size to the west of Loveland, I should say. The Larimer County Sheriff has issued those mandatory evacuations we showed you a little bit earlier, but this is a story that's going to play out certainly through the rest of this day and likely for days to come. But we'll be watching this one. If you are looking for someone who's had to evacuate, or if you yourself has to evacuate, there are some places you can go already set up. The Namaquah Elementary School, the Estes Park Events Complex, and animals and ranch animals can go to the 5290 Arena Circle. Is a place you can take them as well. Again, we're watching some of this spread, and we tend to think of fires as climbing, but they also travel downhill in that those burning trees fall and roll and start new fires as they tumble downhill. This is, as Steve's been alluding to, pretty difficult terrain. The ground crews are going to certainly have a tough time getting to where they be, to where the fire is, I should say. Sky 9 has been able to get a look at several helicopters in the area now. 4 of them are already starting to help, and at least one more is on the way as well. But you can see how active, how hot this fire is burning and continuing to take trees. It's very open land, but as we know, fires move rapidly and they move in whatever direction they want to go, whatever direction the weather takes them. So let's find out a little bit more about what the weather is doing right now. Corey Reppenhagen back with us with the Weather Impact team. Corey?
Yeah, you know, and we're really able to gather quite a bit of information from the visuals being provided by the helicopter. You can really just see the plumes of smoke. They're kind of being pushed a little bit towards the west again. So that means that the winds that are upslope from the Front Range are a little bit stronger than the winds that are countering from the west. And like I mentioned, these winds are converging right on the base of the foothills right now. And so that's why you'll see the shifting winds. And another thing you'll notice is with the winds not being too strong, that smoke plume is going very high and almost straight vertical before it encounters that stronger winds higher in the atmosphere, and that's when it gets pushed out towards the west. So air quality is of course one of those concerns, that because when we have wildfires on the Front Range like this, it becomes everybody's problem, and that is probably what's going to happen with this. We do have an air quality alert for ozone pollution and out-of-state wildfire smoke already in place, but the Colorado Department of Health has put in a special smoke alert here for Larimer County, including Fort Collins and Loveland. The good news is that smoke, like I said, is going straight up, and then it's not until it's really high vertically that it gets pushed over. But eventually, that air will start to filter down, and all of this smoke, there's a lot of smoke. I mean, look at the smoke coming from these fire. That is going to eventually start to settle, and that will likely happen in the evening and nighttime hours. So we'll have to watch and see how that smoke problem evolves, but the health department's already anticipating Larimer County being involved in some long-term and maybe greater. At this point, it's expected to stay in the unhealthy for sensitive groups category, but it can quickly rise, as we've seen, when that smoke starts to settle, where we can get into unhealthy for everyone. So that's what we'll have to monitor. And here is the radar. So we put the special filter on this where we can see only the very finest particles. And this is the last few hours of this smoke. And this right here is the smoke plume that's coming out of this fire. You can see the plume is being picked up by radar coming over right in between Loveland and Fort Collins. And if you can kind of spot the biggest part of the fire here, see it blip there in yellow. That was about right after noon, that fire really exploded and put out some really thick smoke and some heavy debris there that the radar can detect. So in general, even though the winds down low are riding up the slope and kind of pushing the fire up a little bit, the smoke is encountering the westerly winds and is going to be blown out to out over the Front Range. And like I said, here's the forecast for that. The good news is these numbers are not huge. These 10 to 20, maybe 25 mile per hour gusts, that's something that they can deal with and actually put an aggressive fight on this fire. If it gets any bigger, once it starts to get in that 50 mile per hour range, which it could be happening locally because the fire can create its own weather, but in general, the overall conditions here with the winds are good news, and you can kind of see how the winds kind of come upslope in the afternoon here, countering the westerly winds. And that is happening right at the base of the foothills, so right where that fire is being fought. And then we'll see that this smoke is going to be pushed outward, because here's the smoke forecast. This model has not run recently enough to include the newest fire, but we have all this smoke from out of state that's going to be added to now what is local smoke from the Alexander fire.
Corey, thanks very much. We want to get out to one of the evacuation sites. This is at Namaqua Elementary School, and that's where our Kevin Vaughn is. And Kevin, have we seen people already starting to either go there to evacuate or look for people that they might anticipate evacuating?
Yeah, Tom, we talked to some folks inside. There's a handful of people that have already come here to get away from this fire. They're expecting more as the day wears on. There are a few cars in the parking lot, and we're basically waiting to see how many people end up here by the end of the day. We don't know quite what the capacity is here at this point. I can tell you, as we drove up from Denver, we could see the plume from this fire, as soon as we were north of downtown, and see that smoke trail that Corey Reppenhagen was just talking about, going very high into the air and then trailing to the east for what looked like a great distance.
Those things you prepare for these fires, and sadly people have to be ready, and this elementary school in Namaqua there has to be ready to be this place for people to go. And when people get there, there'll be organization that maybe can help make sure that people are connected and they know who's there and who's, if anyone's missing.
Yeah, and I can tell you from past experience that of covering other wildfires, a lot of people whose homes are in the sort of the danger zone stay close to home as long as they can to try to keep an eye on what's happening around where they live. So I would anticipate that the surge in people coming here will be later in the day, assuming this fire's not under control and people can return home, when it's time to start thinking about finding a place to sleep, finding a meal, that kind of thing.
Familiar with the area, ballpark it if you would. How far are you from what would you call the fire itself?
I would say we are maybe 5 miles from the fire. We're sort of on the southwest side of Loveland, just 8 or 10 blocks south of US 34, which of course runs right up into Big Thompson Canyon to the west here. Signs all the way along announcing that Highway 34 is closed when you get up closer to the canyon. So we cannot really see the smoke plume right now because we're in front of the school. But we, you know, we saw it for quite a while coming up here.
It's one of those things too, because once you're in Loveland, of course, cell service, information is so important, and you have cell service, but many times in these remote areas, you're not going to get to see those bars on your phone that allow you to stay in touch, to know what's going on, or to let people know where you are. Always a difficult thing, and we talk about the value of real, hard, solid information on days like this, Kevin.
Absolutely, and you know, I lived in Larimer County for about 8 years earlier in my career, spent a lot of time up in these mountains, and I can tell you there are a lot of places up there where cell service is not great or non-existent.
Well, hopefully the word is out and people know which way to go and how to get out of there. Kevin, thanks for joining us. We'll get back to you with more there at Namaqua Elementary School there in Loveland. And we've also been looking at some of this video of some of these drops, the red retardant being dropped by aircraft as they try to manage the movement of the fire as best they can. Again, this is the Alexander Mountain Fire, just under 250 acres, at least is at last estimated by the Forest Service, and it is burning west of Loveland. There are mandatory evacuations and there are road closures. There's a lot that people in that area need to know, and certainly a lot of people know about it because, as Kevin said, you don't have to be too far north out of Denver before you see that smoke plume, and you can see it all the way up and down the Front Range as well. So these are, again, some of the views we get from different parts of the Front Range. This, again, a CDOT camera along I-25 near US 34 in Loveland, shooting to the horizon to the west. And the plume itself seems to be drifting a little bit, but still a very vertical plume at this point, which is a good sign if there are any. So we want to talk about these mandatory evacuations put in by the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. There's the fire center there, the Alexander Mountain Fire, just west of the city of Loveland. But as far as the evacuation areas, I think there's an updated map that includes areas a little further south in the red. The red is the mandatory evacuation, because I think that new map that they put out now goes all the way down to Pole Hill in the southwest corner. The Storm Mountain would be the top left, and then the yellow areas over there were voluntary evacuation, meaning prepare to evacuate. And again, where you saw Kevin, that is one of the evacuation sites. If you need to evacuate or find someone who you think has evacuated, Namaqua Elementary School, the Estes Park Events Complex, and large animals are going over as well to take care of them. We are going to continue to follow this, of course, for you right here on 9 News, and we will continue to bring the latest as it comes in. So keep it right here. You can also get information, of course, on the 9 News app and at 9news.com. Good afternoon. Along with Kim Christian, I'm Tom Green. We continue to break in because of the breaking news in northern Colorado at this hour. There's a wildfire burning west of Loveland, and you're seeing it up and down the Front Range. It has caused mandatory evacuations. Again, this is the Alexander Mountain Fire, and there you can see it on the map where it is, and it has triggered mandatory evacuations in a surrounding area there that includes where Storm Mountain is, the Bobcat Ridge area as well, down to well, let's get to some of the pictures here. You can see some of the aircraft that are trying to get on top of this fire.
Yeah, they're really hitting it with the best air attack they can at this moment. People have been seeing this smoke, this plume of smoke, for hours now. It is huge. And obviously, we're already nervous about these things in Colorado, but especially in northern Colorado. They've really been hit over the years. It's been extremely hot all summer long. And this is west of Loveland. So while it appears to us overall, we're at over 247 acres. We haven't been updated in the latest numbers. It appears there aren't really structures in that area, but everyone knows how quickly these fires can go, especially in the heat of the day.
So we've been trying to get a handle on things with Corey Reppenhagen, our weather impact team meteorologist, talking about the elements that go into getting a fire like this going. And now when it comes to fighting it, we've been talking about calm winds, at least to some extent, Corey, and that does a couple things. One, it certainly helps the fire stay in one place, and two, it allows that air attack to take place for them to bring in the planes and helicopters to fight the fire.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. A huge plume of smoke, very menacing, but I'm liking a few things that I'm seeing in the visuals that we are getting in. You saw the tanker and the helicopter there in those pictures just a minute ago, making those drops, slurry and water, and it really helps them with their accuracy if the winds cannot be too out of control. And that's what we're seeing right now. Winds generally in the 10 to 25 mile per hour range, gusting. Now that's according to weather stations that are near the fire, not right in the line of the fire. Now this is the Doppler radar. We put this on the most sensitive setting that we can get it to, and that can actually pick up smoke. And that's what you're seeing right here. This is the plume that it was picking up. Now this was at 12:30. This was when I noticed it was the biggest. So you see this yellow area here? That means at that moment, 12:30, the fire was putting out some large embers, enough to be picked up on radar, the size of raindrops and perhaps even some small hail. So that's the size ember that this fire is putting out there just to the west of Loveland. And another thing I'm noticing is that the plume is going straight up, and then it's not moving out to the east until it encounters the upper winds. You can see in this split screen, the video there, the smoke is kind of going straight up with these lighter, relatively lighter winds, and then encountering the upper winds and getting pushed over the Front Range. Here's the computer forecast model. We've been getting a lot of reports of the fire smoke shifting, all right? And here's what's going on. We have winds generally moving out of the west, but in the afternoon, when the heating of the day starts to happen differently according to the mountains and the lower terrain, we start to get upslope winds. And that's what's happening right now. Winds pushing from the east to the west, and that's countering the winds right here along the foothills. And that's why the fire can kind of look shifty. But in general, the fire is going to tend to move uphill and or towards the east according to the winds. And here's the wind gust forecast. Generally staying in the lighter, relatively lighter range in the 15 to 25 mile per hour range, and then even lightening up a little bit when it comes to Tuesday. Now here's an interesting perspective here. Now I put the outline of the Cameron Peak burn scar from 2020. This is a 2,000 acre fire. Here's the 200 acre Alexander Mountain fire right here just to the south of Masonville. You can see the close proximity, but here's why those wind gusts are so important. Now, during this 200,000 acre fire, the winds were gusting west and northwest at 70 to 90 miles per hour. That's when these fires made their huge runs. And so we're not seeing that potential at the moment. So that is why we're looking at that menacing smoke plume and saying, well, there's actually some good information and some good news in there. So that's the comparison to the Cameron Peak fire. Now here's one of the problems. current temperature. These are current temperatures out here. Loveland's still at 89 degrees, 84 in Estes Park. These hot temperatures, all with direct sunlight, are making a huge impact, as well as, Tom, Kim, the relative humidity here in Loveland. It's up to 17%. It's been as low as 12%. But these low relative humidities, as you know, fires love to travel in that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Corey, we'll be keeping an eye on that aspect of what's going on up there. It's interesting because the current measurement is just under 250 acres from the last flyover from the Forest Service. Earlier, Larimer County Sheriffs had estimated about 3 times that size, but when we do get an update on the size, we do expect it to be larger than the footprint they've been talking about so far. Many people have been under mandatory evacuation orders, and one place that those people can go if they're evacuating is Namaqua Elementary School in Loveland, and Kevin Vaughn has been out there for the last hour or so getting a feel for things there. Kevin?
Tom, as you said, we're at Namaqua Elementary School here on the southwest side of Loveland, where some of the people who've evacuated have come. Essentially right now, though, a lot of people are in limbo. They don't know if this is where they'll be spending the night. They don't know if they're going to get to go back home. They don't know if they're going to be moved to another shelter. There's some talk that this shelter may be closed later this afternoon. Another one may open in another part of town. We talked to a woman named Ashley Bernal. She's here right now. And she was able to get out with a lot of her possessions. She said she grabbed, passports, her baby books for her children, important documents, and she has a home bakery, so she grabbed her baking equipment that's very expensive, and she got all of that out. And she told us the reason she knew to get ready quickly and to be ready to go was from past experience. Let's hear a little bit of what she had to say here.
For the Cameron Peak fire, I wasn't here for that, but my partner was, and they ended up getting evacuated to the Marriott by Blue Arena. Today, now I'm not sure where we're going to go because they told us to come here to Namaqua, and I come here and they said, yeah, you could go ahead and wait here. You could take your animals to the Humane Society, but they haven't said anything about accommodations for the night. And when I asked about it, they said they won't know until about 5 o'clock.
We did talk to her just a few minutes before we went on the air. She said she was going to go and get some lunch and come back a little later to try to get a better idea of what things are looking like later. She did share with us some photos. The first picture she took, the fire was very small and on a hillside. She told us she didn't think that much of it at the time, and then she showed us a series of pictures as it progressed. The last one was from her driveway just before she left, and the fire looked very close indeed, although it sounds like it is still at least a couple of miles away from her house.
Yeah, so people are just so hungry for information in situations like this, where to go, what to do, what's happening. We'll continue to try to share as much as we get, and Kevin will check back in with you a little bit later. Thanks.
Yeah, and we have gotten a new update. The fire is at 365 acres at this point. We weren't surprised by that. We knew it couldn't stay at that 247 just by judging by the smoke itself. You could tell it was growing.
So we talked about the evacuations. There are also road closures. Highway 34 is shut down, and where it is shut down is where we have Steve Stager, and he's had a chance to talk with several people coming in and going out. Steve?
Tom, yeah, we're at Highway 34 right at County Road 29 is where this road closure starts, although we did just get an update from the Colorado State Patrol that they're going to start letting some of us in a little bit closer to Sylvandale Guest Ranch, which is just a little bit further up Highway 34. So when we're done talking with you, we'll head that way. But when we were talking to you about an hour ago, guys, that plume of smoke was a lot darker. So perhaps that's a good sign that we don't see as much black smoke right now, although if you look around the corner, you can see a little bit of darker smoke back behind there. We've been watching helicopters. In fact, there's one that's probably out of Anna's range right now, a helicopter making its way over to a reservoir, which is right down County Road 29 here, where they're picking up and doing bucket dumps on this fire, which they've been doing all afternoon long. We've also seen some planes make their way through and throw that red retardant down on the ground. What we've been told from some folks who live up here, that area where the fire is burning is extremely rugged, tough to get a ground crew up there, tough to get kind of work going on that fire. So they've been doing a lot of firefighting in the air. Now, a little bit earlier, about an hour ago, we were talking to Carolyn. She was worried about her parents, who are both under mandatory evacuations. and they're in their 80s. They were taking a little bit while longer than Carolyn really wanted them to, so she actually got the state trooper here to get on the phone with their dad and say, it's time to go now. And wouldn't you know it, the state trooper had a little bit more power. We talked to Carolyn's mom right after they got down or out of the canyon and evacuated.
So I was quite concerned, and it looked like it was right coming down our ridge, but it was the ridge next to us. So.
Got it. What's it like on the inside? We don't have eyes there. I mean, are people frantic?
Sometimes it's good, and sometimes the smoke comes over, and it's pretty smoky for a while.
So we've seen a steady stream of traffic, people making their way out of the canyon here. We're going to head inside a little bit and see if we have a different view as we get closer to Sylvandale Guest Ranch. But again, the view from here looking better. Hopefully that's a good sign, and hopefully firefighters are getting a bit of control on this fire, guys. We'll send it back to you.
Yeah, we have seen activity from the air, and they have been bringing it 4, and I think maybe a 5th helicopter has joined, as well as fixed-wing aircraft that's been dropping slurry as well as water. So hopefully they are having a productive afternoon. We'll check back in with Steve a little bit later. When you talk about that mandatory evacuation area that came out from the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, that red area is mandatory evacuation notice. Up to the upper left would be Storm Mountain. Down to the southwest part would be Pole Hill. Up on the northeast side is the Bobcat Ridge area over there. And then on the further south side, I'm trying to check that map. That's the Flatiron Reservoir Campground is down there near on the southeast.
So some of the evacuation areas you can go to, we just talked to Kevin Vaughn at Namaqua Elementary, and that's where a lot of folks are going, as well as the Estes Park Events Complex. That's another spot they can go to. That's where you can take your animals. A lot of people have big animals, small animals. NOCO Humane is taking the smaller animals if you're nervous about your animals. But these are the evacuation points. But part of what Kevin was talking about is people are just desperate for information more than anything.
As always, the American Red Cross is suddenly ready. They are always ready to be ready. And John Seward with American Red Cross joins us now to talk about their plans for helping out for the people just to the west of Loveland there. John, thanks for joining us. Tell us what you know at this point about what the American Red Cross response is going to look like.
Yeah, so we have our team of volunteers are in place in Loveland. We've got teams from across the state and even up in Wyoming, our Colorado and Wyoming region, volunteers taking time out of their day to help their communities in times like this. At about 3 o'clock, our latest shelter counts there in Loveland, about 30 people there. We expect those numbers to likely change and move around a little bit as evening comes around. At this point, we're kind of in a waiting game, looking for information, looking to get more details from our partners, the Sheriff's Office, Emergency Management, and Fire Protection. And we have plans in place to be able to have safe overnight shelters for anybody that's been evacuated. We're working with local churches to begin to stand up those shelters. And we will be bringing in dinner and food for everybody as well, really working to build those safe places for folks to stay while we wait out these evacuations.
Well, John, you guys have done this dozens, thousands of times, and especially a lot of fire in Colorado. I'm curious how you guys dispatch. How do you figure out, because it's hard to even for us to gauge how many people potentially you might be helping. How do you do that? Do you wait for the information like we do?
You know, I wish there was a better science to it than that, but really we go where the needs are most. So we follow the crowds. So as folks started evacuating, we started working with our partners there in Larimer County and the Sheriff's Office, the Office of Emergency Management, and really helped let them give us some direction as to where they need our help. And then we go there. They said, hey, we need folks at the elementary school there in Loveland. Hey, we need folks at the events complex there in Estes Park, and that's where we started sending our volunteers.
Oh, you got great volunteers who do this work selflessly.
John, thanks to you and the American Red Cross. We'll be keeping an eye on the American Red Cross's efforts here as well. Thank you very much for joining us. So we want to talk to Silke Goss, the owner of the Dam Store. If you've ever been up to Loveland, you know it's been there for quite a while. But Silke, tell us what you've seen and what you're hearing right now.
right now, we just had the fire trucks were in our parking lot. They had a kind of a staging area, and they just left to go into the canyon. Well, it still looks pretty bad, but it looks like it's a little bit better than earlier today. My daughter saw a little bit of smoke this morning around 10:30, I think, and called 911 and wasn't sure what it was. She was asking if it's a controlled burn or, and I said, nope, that's a wildfire. And they had another person call in reporting the fire. And from there, it went really, really fast.
Well, I know normally you get quite a few people coming in. Are you operating or are you closed now because of what's happening in and around you?
We are open, but only for people if they need to make an emergency phone call because you don't get service out here. So if they need to use our Wi-Fi or our phone, so that's why we're here. So we're not really open, but
but there to help, yeah.
But there to help. We talk about
yeah,
that because
yeah, definitely.
even when we go to cover some of these fires, it's hard for us to get cell service to communicate our crews that are out there back to the station. So you're really a big help to those folks because we're so dependent on these phones, right? And Wi-Fi. Somebody's got to communicate.
Yes, absolutely.
How many?
Yeah, so I mean, we obviously we want to help.
Yeah.
So we're staying here until hopefully they will put this out at some point.
Yeah. Do you have a sense, like you can give us a better perspective about the homes or the people that live in some of these areas? Or are these full-time residents or are these people that, you know, just like living out in the beauty of that area?
Oh, absolutely. They live out here, and a lot of these people have large animals. And when we had the really big fire in 2020, I mean, it was so bad, and everybody is trying to hurry and get their animals out. And yeah, it's, you know, you live out here and you have to live with these fires.
Well, it's sad that people have experience now. They know what to do or what it's going to look like and feel like just in the last few years. Silke, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you continue to help people there at the dam store on Highway 34, right there just outside of Loveland. Thanks again, Silke.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So you mentioned 365 acres in size now. They're also saying 3,500 people have been given evacuation orders.
Wow.
So there are quite a few people who have to move, Corey, and keep an eye on, you know, how you pack, how quickly you can move.
Exactly, because we know how fast these situations can change. And a lot of that usually has to do with the wind conditions. And the winds, as it is now and has been throughout the day so far, have been a little favorable with a little bit, I would say, relatively calm winds compared to other situations we've seen in fire. Now, I want to show you something on the Doppler radar here, and we've put this down to the most sensitive mode. So it's picking up all kinds of other things, but it can also pick up wildfire smoke, and that's what this is, this big plume here coming from the foothills. This was at 1225. That yellow spot there, that means at that point the fire was very intense, putting up large embers. So the radar is picking up that as a large droplet. It's a piece of fire ember, and so that moment was the most active. And the thing that I want to show you is, as I put it into motion, actually I'll go back to it. It's since then there have been no more yellow spots on that radar, which means we have not seen the big embers like we saw in between noon and 12:30. So that kind of coincides with some of the evidence that we're seeing. Steve Stager says the color of the smoke is different, lighter, so perhaps it's not getting into those bigger canopies. One other thing we should keep an eye on is because, I mean, look at the smoke coming from that fire. That is some thick smoke that's been put out and continually being put out. That's going to affect the air quality, which we already have an air quality alert on the Front Range here. Because of ozone and out-of-state wildfire smoke coming in, now we're adding another layer of local smoke, which is going to highly impact Larimer County because this smoke is generally blowing towards the west. It's a good thing it's coming up first before it's encountering those high upper winds and then coming over, but we're going to have to watch Larimer County as that develops. Here's the smoke forecast model, which does not include that newest fire just yet, but we see the wildfire smoke from out of state, which is going to keep us at relatively unhealthy for sensitive groups. As you see this high pressure down here circulating clockwise, pulling all that smoke, and that's going to also mean that our local smoke will generally move to the west. So we'll have to watch and see how that affects the air quality going forward. But I will say that the winds are forecast to remain in that 15 to 25 mile per hour range, which is going to allow the aerial assault on this fire to be very accurate and very efficient. We've seen the helicopters and the tankers doing its work out there. So at least we're getting some good news as far as that is concerned.
Yeah,
All right.
with this heat, that is the most encouraging thing we could have, is at least the winds are cooperating to some degree.
Exactly, because the temperature and the humidity is not cooperating. It's been hot. We've had very little cloud cover, very little precipitation. That area of Larimer County has been in a long-term 3-month drought where we have below average precipitation. So the winds cooperating, the other parts of the weather not cooperating, and the climate over the last 3 months not cooperating at all.
All right, Corey, thanks for keeping us posted. The Alexander Mountain Fire has been burning for about 4 hours now, and we just got an official update as far as growth of the size.
365 acres at this point, but we're going to keep you posted. We're going to be back in a little bit. We're just going to stay on this and have our crews update us as well as evacuations and voluntary evacuations. We know a lot of people are eager for information.
And with that information, we are expecting a media briefing at 4 o'clock. We will come back then to bring that to you for the latest on the Alexander Mountain Fire burning just west of Loveland. Until then, we return you now to a regular program. Good afternoon. We come to you again with the breaking news coming just west of Loveland. The story in northern Colorado is the wildfire that's been causing evacuations there today.
At this hour, we know that fire is at least 365 acres in size, but we know it's probably growing.
So let's take a look at the location there. Of course, you see Loveland and then the center of the Alexander Mountain Fire, and now again at 365 acres in measurement. It's been burning since before noon today, and you can see in the area that it is very close to Loveland, but other cities up and down the Front Range certainly have been able to see a large plume of smoke through most of their afternoon. This is new video from Trenton. This is showing one of the airdrops being made there. You can see slurry coming out of an airplane. This all happening as we speak. Quite a bit of air support is being provided that we are seeing helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft dropping water and slurry, much of that water coming out of Horsetooth Reservoir up to the north.
Right. In fact, Poudre Fire and others are telling people they're getting everyone out of that area, out of Horsetooth Reservoir, anybody that's on the water, because they want to clear the area. They would like to access that water to help in this fight. Clearly, it's the air attack that makes all the difference, and if the winds are right and they can fly, they really want to get after this because it's in a fairly rugged, remote area.
We've been talking at length about information, and there is a media briefing set for 4 o'clock. They're having it, though, in proximity to one of the fire setup areas for the first responders. That area, though, lacks a lot of cell service, so we're not able to bring you that information just yet. Steve Steger is there, though. He'll be joining us with a complete report on what the authorities at this point are saying about the fire. That media information should be coming to us pretty soon.
We have talked about a couple of evacuation areas for large animals, but also for people. Namaqua Elementary School is one of those evacuation sites, and our Kevin Vaughn has been there for a few hours now. And Kevin, you've talked to some folks. Many of them, you know, remember Cameron Peak all too well in their memory. So they got up and moved quickly, and now they're kind of waiting to know what happens.
That's the biggest thing, Kim and Tom. There's a lot of uncertainty about what these folks face the rest of the day. Some of them have been told that if they have to spend the night, it likely will not be here at Namaqua Elementary School, that there's likely to be a different shelter opened in the city of Loveland where they would go if they have to spend the night. People we've talked to don't know if that's the case. I can tell you one thing that we've noticed here just in the last half an hour is a noticeable shift in the smoke plume. It was rising very high up into the air before starting to drift to the east. It's now drifting much lower into the northeast from our vantage point here in the southwest part of Loveland. We talked earlier to a woman named Ashley Bernal, and she talked about the realization of realizing there was a fire and what it was like as her and her family tried to pack up, get the stuff that was important to them, and get out. Let's hear from her now.
The first thing when I first saw it, I just thought, this is just a little fire. It's a little brush fire. It's not going to do anything. They're going to get it taken care of. By the time that I got back home and saw the flames on the mountain, I started panicking. And my partner, he's being really calm about it, and I'm freaking out. Okay, we got to go get this. We got to go get that. And so I'm a little worried at this point. I'm trying to remain calm. I have a 2-year-old and a 15-year-old, and so we're just trying to keep it together.
She is keeping it together, I'd say, because a little while she told us she was going to go grab some lunch while she was trying to wait and find out what the news would be. We, of course, are going to bring you much more from this as the day unfolds, and we'll get that media briefing as soon as we can.
All right, Kevin, thanks very much. Up at Namaqua Elementary School, one of the evacuation sites for people fleeing or having to leave the Alexander Mountain Fire because of those mandatory evacuation notices.
It's good to hear from people like that react quickly. And we talked to Steve Steger earlier, and he talked to someone that was worried about their older parents not moving quick enough. So, Kevin, they've all learned, grab it and go. Grab it and go. You never know what the time is.
They've certainly had experience with that in this part of the state in recent years, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, thanks. All right, Corey Reppenhagen is going to join us, talk about the weather and its impact. I see now we're at 97 degrees in Denver. I mean, that's a big part of this equation, isn't it, Corey? And, you know, when Kevin was alluding to the behavior of the smoke, that's often a signal as to what's taking place on the ground with the fire, but also what's happening with the winds aloft.
Exactly. A lot of this is great information that's coming from eyewitnesses like Steve and Kevin and all the viewers that have been helping us out with reports. The behavior of the smoke can give you a lot of detail in what the fire is doing and what it may be doing in the near future. Now take a look at this radar image. This is from 12:30 today. This is set to the lowest setting where it can pick up wildfire smoke particles that are very small in size. And you can see the smoke plume at this time and a very distinct yellow dot here. And that means that the radar was detecting some embers very large in size. And at that moment, between noon and 12:30, we were seeing the biggest embers from that fire. Now now I'll put it into motion and you can watch as we go through. The fire did not show any more of those large embers, those big yellow embers being detected by the radar. So that means that perhaps they were able to start getting a hold of that before it continued to create embers that size. Now here's the current wind situation, because the winds are so important. These numbers are actually pretty encouraging from what I'm seeing here, between 15 and 20 mile per hour gusts. Now we don't have a weather sensor right in the vicinity of the fire, but all of these weather sensors around the area are detecting what would be considered relatively light winds. So when you compare it to some of the big 60 to 70, 80 mile per hour winds that we've seen in 2020, the 100-mile-an-hour winds we saw with the Marshall Fire, that's what really drives these fires. And to see these numbers is pretty encouraging. We're also seeing a little bit of a difference in the wind now. The upper level winds from the west are starting to take hold. We were seeing some brief upslope winds coming in here to counter things, and that may be why Kevin was seeing that smoke plume starting to drift off to the northeast. All of this is relatively good news when it comes to fire behavior. And if you look at the wind forecast here, going over the next 12 hours or so, going into later parts of Monday, the wind will generally stay in that relatively calm 20 to 25 mile per hour range around that fire. We may get another surge of upslope winds here in the late afternoon hours when the surface area starts to cool. That fire will remain hot. The countering of those two temperature differences could reactivate a little bit of wind, but the models are not spitting out any really frightening information towards us. And the reason why that's so important is when we compare this fire, this is the current fire, the Alexander Mountain Fire here just west of Loveland, and this is the 2020 Cameron Peak burn scar. So about a 300-acre fire compared to a 200,000-acre fire. And when this fire really made its big moves and covered a lot of ground, that's when we were seeing those 70 to 80 mile per hour winds like Labor Day of 2020 when it made that huge run. So at least we don't see that in the forecast, and that's going to help those firefighters. But what's not going to help them is the temperatures. These are current temperatures. It's still 99 degrees here in the metro area. Loveland still checking in at 96 degrees. And the relative humidity, guys, this is just absolutely nuts here with relative humidity still below the teens. So that is something that will work against fighting that fire.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was a matter of time with the lack of rain here through most of summer. So it was coming our way.
Yeah, tough conditions. But thank you for all that perspective and explaining where the winds are and everything else. So we're going to stay in touch with you, Corey, because we know sometimes we hit our high temperature within the next half hour or so, usually.
Exactly. We'll be hitting that high temperature, and we'll see how the difference when the ambient air starts to cool and that fire remains hot, we'll get some more countering winds in the area of that firefight. So that's something we'll also have to watch.
Okay, thank you.
We've been talking about some of the evacuations, but there's also there are road closures, the main one being Highway 34 closed in the Big Thompson Canyon because of the fire. This is a view from I-25 right around 34 there, but you can see why 34 as it gets closer to that fire would have to be shut down. So that's the situation there. Now, as far as the mandatory evacuations, that's the red zone, the Bobcat Ridge natural area to the northeast. You have Flatiron Reservoir to the southeast, And then Pole Hill would be maybe the southwest corner, and Storm Mountain the northwest corner of that. But the yellow area, voluntary evacuation, of course, that means be ready. Be ready if you need to move, be ready to do so.
And a lot of folks probably have been looking at that and doing that for the last couple of hours, knowing that this is out there, and so many people are reporting this smoke from Boulder all the way around the metro area, Berthoud, Loveland, and you know, when you see that, you start making decisions quickly.
We've been watching some of the air traffic overhead as people have been forced to make a move because of the mandatory evacuation orders. Again, the site where Kevin Vaughn has been reporting from, the Namaqua Elementary School, is one place. The Estes Park Events Complex, another place that's been made available, and large animals as well, that many live in that high country. There are places to go, so hopefully everyone is going to be accounted for and will have moved to safety.
We're going to bring you another update, hopefully when we hear from that press briefing. As we mentioned, there's limited cell service. We're going to turn that and get that information to you as soon as we can, probably 15, 20 minutes. And then we're going to have 9 News at 5 on Channel 9. So
we'll see you there. Of course, you can also follow along at the 9 News app and at 9news.com.
What's a 9?
365 acres in size. We've also got lots of great video from many viewers. This is from Trenton, showing the airdrops in that area. Lots of slurry drops. We've seen everything from planes to helicopters, tankers as well, helping in the firefight. There is limited cell service in that area, so it's been a little sketchy trying to get information from authorities on the scene. But Larimer County is doing a really good job keeping us posted as to what the resources are and evacuations and where people can go.
Yeah, it's also tough for people in those mandatory evacuation areas to get information or to give information because of cell service being so limited in that rugged area. We want to talk about some of those water drops and where that water is coming from. This is a look from our camera near Horsetooth Reservoir, looking at the smoke plume, but the reservoirs and the bodies of water nearby are helping to feed the firefight. Larimer County Department of Natural Resources telling people to, if you're recreating at Horsetooth Reservoir, to stop, because they're going to be using that very actively with air equipment that needs to get water. And we're seeing that in other places as well, like Green Ridge Glade Reservoir, and that's where we have a viewer who's joining us now, seeing and hearing some of what's gone on there. So this is Clega Sheridan, currently there, and tell us what you've seen so far.
Yeah, so far it started out as a smaller, tiny fire. Honestly, I thought it was somebody burning in a ditch. It grew substantially within 30 minutes. So, me and my friend Mike Baldwin, we took off in the car, and I used to live kind of back on those roads, and I had an idea that they were probably going to be pulling from that reservoir. That reservoir is, I mean, it was right on the ridge of it. We were seeing flames come up through the middle, constant water drops, some fire retardant drops. I mean, the winds were changing directions. It would come west, east, to north, south. It was definitely a sight to see compared to other wildfires in that area. There was a line of people definitely watching, but they were hiding it pretty well. Lots of black smoke in the area. I just hope all the people that live there go safely.
So the reservoir is near where they're stopping or had been stopping traffic, right? You're kind of between or near Highway 34 and County Road 29, right?
Yep, that reservoir actually comes right off of County Road 29. Okay. To the north. And
are you on a cell phone? Are you getting cell service there?
It's spotty. It seems to be working pretty good right now.
Have you lived there a long time, Kylea? Have you lived there a long time and you're pretty familiar with this spot and knowing what people are facing as far as evacuations?
Yeah, so I actually, my dad has owned the property up at Storm Mountain since 1967, and then we lived right off of County Road 29 for about 4 years as well, right where the dam hits. So I do know that area pretty well. Luckily, there's not a whole lot of houses in that area to get affected. It's more just a wildlife area.
Yeah, and then there's probably some people that are, we've been hearing about large animals and things like that, probably some ranchers and folks like that.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is Sylvandale Ranch sits right in that valley, right before the dam store, and they have, hundreds of horses to try to get out of there. That's a pretty good ranch area back in there. There is a lot of goats and chickens, and so anybody that has trailers and stuff, anybody up there could use help.
Wow.
Well, have you seen much change? We're looking at this fire maybe somewhere around 5 hours now. You've talked about it. Certainly it was getting bigger quickly, but now it seems like maybe things have slowed down a bit.
Yeah, so definitely towards that would be the east side of it has slowed down quite a lot. It's been constant water drops and constant fire retardant drops there on that east side of the fire. So it's slowed down substantially. I'm hoping they're trying to keep it from getting over 34. When we stopped at the dam store, it was just barely starting to trickle over that ridge over where the water pipeline runs across 34 there.
All right. Well, we will hopefully get some official information back from that press conference, that media briefing that was going on just a few minutes ago, and we'll get that turned around and share that information. But we certainly appreciate you and your firsthand account, Kylie. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Right there at the
She
Green
knows
Ridge.
that area so well.
Well, yeah. Family's been there for a long
Yeah,
time.
it really was helpful to, I think, many of us to try and get markers as to what they're dealing with and also the circumstances. So I was thankful to her.
I want to get over to Corey Reppenhagen now, because obviously those winds I see behind you, they're going to play a big part in what happens over these next 24, 36, 48 hours, Corey.
Exactly. There's so many factors that go into wildfire behavior, but wind is absolutely paramount. And as we look at those menacing smoke plumes, and residents can actually see some of the flames up on the ridge there, it's terrifying, but there is some good news in the details here, and that is the wind. Here's the current wind gusts here. So these are weather stations that are relatively close to the fire. There's going to be nothing right into the vicinity of the fire, but these numbers that we're picking up here are relatively calm compared to what we have seen in some of these big fires. These winds are starting to, out of the west here, starting to take more of a dominant role. We had some upslope winds here, which kind of led to all that shiftiness going on that people were seeing with that fire. But I think now that these westerlies are starting to prevail, we'll start to see the fire kind of generally start to try to move towards the east more than any other direction. And these winds will also help those firefighters in their fight. Now let's take a look at the wind gust forecast to see how things are going to go over the next 24 hours here, maybe 36 hours. And right now, we'll go into the evening. We may see a little bit of a resurgence here once the foothills start to cool and compared to where the heat of the wildfire. But in general, we're going to see a decrease in winds even further as we go into the rain in most of the area. And that does include some of the foothills areas too. So the reason why these winds are so important, and that is because that is the driver of those really big runs that create large fires. Now, this is the location of the Alexander Mountain fire here, right on the southeastern edge of the Cameron Peak burn scar, which is outlined here in this red. And now when the Cameron Peak fire made these huge runs like Labor Day 2020, we had wind gusts in the 60 to 90 mile per hour range. That is what creates these huge runs and creates these massive fires. So at least that's good news that we don't have that in the forecast, which is going to at least slow the progress and make this fire easier to start. The problem that we do have with the weather is the temperatures. These are current temperatures, still 98 down here in Denver, 96 in Loveland. That makes it difficult for the firefighters to fight, and it also makes it easier for the fire to travel. And guys, these relative humidities are down there in the scary range in the single digits in some areas.
All right, Corey, thanks. We'll see you over on 9 News at 5 o'clock coming up in just a couple minutes. Thanks. Talking about the situation, Highway 34 is right here where it meets with I-25. There, Highway 34 is open, but as we were just talking about with Kylie Sheridan, it was shut down at County Road 29, much closer to the fire, but that is the view from there, closed through the Big Thompson Canyon. And the mandatory evacuations in red here, this has not changed. We're again talking about a 365-acre fire. The yellow are the voluntary evacuation areas. Of course, that's where you want to make sure that you are ready to go should the fire start to behave poorly in your direction. The evacuation centers, well, we talked about it. Kevin Vaughn's been at Namaqua Elementary School. The Estes Park Events Complex is another place that you can either go or look for someone that you think may have had to go there. And we were just talking about some of those big animals as well, that there will be places for them to go as well.
And our Steve Steger talked to a woman whose family used the sheriff's office to get her out and evacuated.
So I was quite concerned, and it looked like it was right coming down our ridge, but it was the ridge next to us. So.
Got it. What's it like on the inside? We don't have eyes there. I mean, are people frantic?
Sometimes it's good, and sometimes the smoke comes over, and it's pretty smoky for a while.
Again, that's the situation as we talk about the Alexander Mountain Fire, which has been burning now since before noon. We're going to get some of that media briefing back here as soon as we can and share it with you when we come back in just a few minutes over at 9 News at 5 o'clock.
Yes, we'll be back.
Walk the dog.